My name is Bob Wheeler. I work for ClearedJobs.Net. I want to introduce myself first and introduce the panelists real quick, kind of get a panel of you guys. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about being a good job seeker. And I'm going to be asking the folks here for some tidbits on what it's like, because in the big picture I talk about the hiring process is kind of like martial arts and kung fu and stuff like that, because it's, you can probably tell I'm a big martial arts guy, right? I look like it, but really, if they push, you pull. If you pull, they push. You know, so if you understand the hiring process, you're going to make smarter decisions on how to navigate that process. And I was in the Navy for 20 years when I came out. A lot of people don't really have a good understanding of what the hiring process is like. So we're going to kind of pull the cover back on that. So what we've got here is we've got a few different folks. We got Don Freeman here. He's from OBXTek. Don is a program manager. So the other three folks are primarily recruiters. Don is that hiring manager you always hear so much about and don't know who he or she is. You know, Don has got a program with about 140 or so
140
full-time employees, you know, Air Force contract over at the Pentagon. So he hires a lot of people, or he's in that process all the time.
25 vacancies. So you know.
Then we got Michael, am I saying Luongo?
Luongo.
Luongo, he's from Lunarline. You know, he's been there for at least 3 years. I was checking out your LinkedIn profile. But you've also got some previous experience in hiring as well. I looked kind of through there. You've done things besides recruiting at a number of different companies.
Yeah. So my background is I've been healthcare was prior to cyber, but cyber overall about 6 years. But yeah, I did some stuff on the healthcare field as well. But yeah, so I'd say total overall maybe about 5 or 6 years on recruiting.
And then we've got Aaron Duignam. Yeah. From EY. You've been there at EY for at least 5 years, or about 5 years, and you've got more than that, like 10 years or so of recruiting experience, different places, or somewhere thereabouts?
Correct, yeah. I started my career in public accounting with Deloitte, actually, a pretty big competitor of ours at EY, but moved into recruiting 3 years down the road and been there ever since, never looked back.
And then we've got Gabi Knowlton from Adobe Federal. You've been with Adobe for, according to your LinkedIn profile, about 8 years or so, thereabouts, but you've got lots, like a couple decades of recruiting experience with lots of different companies, big and small, it looks like.
Yeah, I've been recruiting for close to 3 decades, and mostly enterprise level software, so large and small companies.
Yeah, so I'm telling you, we've been doing these panel discussions at these events for a long time. This is probably the best panel discussion we've had as far as just the sheer amount of experience to have on here. So I'm really excited to get into this. I will tell you, we're going to go through this. We do need to be done at 10:45 because these folks are going to be recruiting. So at 10:45 we got to be done. I'll stay around to answer a couple questions, but let them get out at 10:45 if you don't mind, so they can get back to their booths and everything. So we will be keeping an eye on that. And before we get too far into this, let's go ahead and figure out more about the audience that we've got in here now. How many folks in here are available for work like right now? If someone offered you a job tomorrow, you can take a job tomorrow. Okay, so you know, maybe half or a little more than half. How many folks here are kind of just testing the market, looking around, looking for things, you know, keeping your eye on what's going on? Anybody here more in that regard? All right. Anybody in here military veterans? Okay, yeah, quite a bit of military veterans. How many of you folks who are military veterans are going to, you know, get out in the next few months, or just recently got out, and this is basically the first job you've had to look for since you talked to a recruiter? Yeah. I was a military recruiter for years. That's how I got into recruiting. And you know, one of the big differences is the military hires you for your aptitude. You know, and they say, hey, well, we can train him or her to do whatever we want them to do. How smart are you? You know, how physically fit are you? And now you get hired by what can you do, not what can they teach you to do. You know, although they're going to teach you to do stuff as well. Yeah. But still, that's a big shift. It's a big shift. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this talk here. The first thing I like to do when we start off with these programs is give you an idea of what it's like to kind of be a recruiter and a hiring manager. So I'm going to start on the far side with Gabi, and I'm going to ask each one of these folks to kind of give you an idea of how many recs they handle and how many hiring managers they support. So a rec is a requisition. It means like where they say, hey, find me one of these or 5 of those. How many requisitions and how many hiring managers are you supporting right now, Gabi?
Oh goodness. So on average, the recruiters at Adobe will carry anywhere from probably 20 to 30 open positions at a time. Everything's twice different than full time. I support right now 2 vice presidents that are tied to sales. One that is for the legacy products that Adobe's known for, and then the other one is all of Adobe Systems Federal.
And is it all under one hiring manager, or do you have different hiring managers?
No, we have different hiring managers. I would say between all of them, I'm probably juggling I'd say about 35 different hiring leaders, first line managers.
Wow. So and we're going to get into that a little bit more in a second. So, Aaron, what about you? How many recs, how many hiring managers are you guys working with?
Yep, so I personally handle around 15 recs.
Mhm.
I'm here representing our government and public sector, which
Sure.
part of why our group alone has probably over 60 open recs right now. And hiring managers probably double that.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
As far as open recs right now, we're about 35 right now, and that mostly entails anything cyber related, but also we're doing a lot with software engineering or developing or any kind of code reviews. So I think we're averaging about 35 right now. Hiring managers probably deal with about 4 right now. We have VPs in 4 different divisions within our company, so I probably go with them and that's it, and just coordinate after we've done interviews and talk with them.
All right, so before we get to Don, I want to remind you what a hiring manager is. A hiring manager is not a specific title. It's basically just a job where he's the manager and gets the authority to hire somebody, or he or she gets the authority to hire somebody. So you got to remember, this relationship between a hiring manager and recruiters is critical, and it's different each time a lot of times. But if Don has got running a program and he's hiring this many people, that also means there's not enough people to do the work that needs to get done. So he's busy in that regard. And he's also got to deal with talking to recruiters and coming to job fairs and things like that. So Don, do you just have one recruiter that works for your program, or do you work with multiple different recruiters that support you at the same time?
We have a staff of 5 recruiters. One will be in the booth with me today. I'm hiring for 25 specific openings in and around the Pentagon for the Secretary of the Air Force. Rob in the booth with me will be representing the other 30 or 40 vacancy positions that we will be filling. So we have about 55 to 60, 65 open positions like everyone else here on the panel this morning. I'm also a veteran, so if you show up and even if I can't use what you have, stop by my booth. I'll talk to you about your resume, see if I can give you some pointers to pass it on back. As I say, you take care of those coming behind you.
But when you see how busy these folks are, this can explain why if you go up to a recruiter and say, hey Gabi, can you tell me about this position? And Gabi might say, I really don't know much about that position, even though it's part of Adobe, for example. Because recruiters get handed certain numbers of recs that they need to understand those things. And then also that relationship with the hiring manager, can be big. Mike, do all of your hiring managers operate exactly the same way, or do they all kind of work a little different?
They all work a little different, some maybe I'm closer to. I do a lot more on the federal side, because we have 2 divisions. We have a commercial and a federal. Commercial kind of, they work a little different, kind of do their own thing. The federal, I think, that's what I'm a little tighter with. So processes are a lot quicker.
Yeah. Aaron, any examples of how, don't throw anybody under the bus, but any examples of how hiring managers can be different? Like this program, this person wants it this way and that person wants it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So because we're growing so quickly, we actually are hosting interview nights once a week in our office right down the street. I mentioned that we have probably double the amount of hiring managers based on the recs. So at the manager and senior manager level, every week different members of our team come in to interview. So we get a mixed bag of reviews and mixed bag of interview styles based on the manager that comes in that week, right? So managing that is definitely tough.
Hey, Gabi, can you maybe speak to different hiring managers and how that might affect the process of like timeline, getting back to somebody, setting up interviews? Do some hiring managers tend to work faster than others?
Yeah, we've got some that work faster than others. We've got some that'll take, for sales, for example, I've got some that'll hire people with 3 years of experience. I've got others that want individuals that have been doing this for 15 to 20 years. So it's all different, but it also varies based on the client that's going to be impacted. That also will impact the duration of time it takes.
That's a great point. The different hiring managers have got different clients, so that's why you could say, well, hey, how come I've got 3 years experience and Adobe didn't hire me, but Adobe hired my buddy who got hired with 3 years experience? They could have been completely different programs. And so, in the military, especially for all those folks who were veterans, we get kind of used to know by the book it says if you have X, Y, and Z, you'll get considered, you'll get promoted, you'll get whatever. And when it comes to the private sector and the government contracting sector, there's a lot of more nuance that goes into that. And some of it is, is driven by the client. Some of it's just driven by the personality of the hiring manager as well.
I'd like to say this about
Go ahead.
recruiters. They're their first stage, usually the entry into a company, but their talents, they don't know everything about every job across the entire company. They can't be expected to. But their expertise over time can get deeper, but usually it's a mile wide and an inch deep, as we say in the military. of a hiring manager. Now I'm focused on my program. I am going to go deep with you, and so it's going to be a different interview when you come to talk to me than when you go to a recruiter. They've got a tough job trying to scramble around and figure it all out for everybody. My job is to figure it out for myself. Fair enough?
Go ahead, Gabi.
I'd love to add one more thing too, especially with a company the size of Adobe, persistence. If we say no, or if we don't respond right now, there may be something down the road. So continue, keep following up, because what we don't have need for right now, we may close a contract next week and then suddenly have the need. So keep following up, keep trying, keep applying.
So I'm going to lead with Aaron on this one, and one of the things I want to ask all three of the recruiters is, well, first let me preface by saying this way. In the hiring process, there's different roles, different things that happen. There's something called sourcers, who are people who spend basically all day, like on a job board like ClearedJobs.Net, looking for resumes to send to the recruiters. There's the recruiting, who is the person who's engaging with the prospect, knows from the hiring manager what they're looking for, kind of makes all those things happen. Then you got the hiring manager. Some companies, that's all the same person. Some companies, it's not. So what's your process like at EY, Aaron? Is it, do you have sourcers and then recruiters and hiring managers, or do you do some more of the full cycle stuff?
So our sourcers are our recruiters.
Mhm.
However, we do have colleagues, we call them experienced hire recruiters, that kind of take the baton, if you will, on candidates and help them get set up for scheduling the interviews and everything else. And then once they get past that, the offer process or offer stages.
What about you guys, Mike? Are you similar, or?
Yeah, kind of in a way, but I kind of juggle a few hats. So, as far as I'll do some sourcing if I need to, depending on the load, because we might get a big contract where we need 20 people right away. So I'll do that, but also maybe I'll work with some outside staffing firms too, because it's myself and another recruiter, that's it. So when you have that many recs, it's kind of difficult, but yeah, I'll do that. We also throw stuff on job boards too, so if it's ZipRecruiter, if it's Indeed, if it's LinkedIn, we'll post those too, and we get a lot of applicants. So, we'll pick those, but for the most part, yeah, I'm gonna do a lot of the pre-screening after the sourcing, and then work with hiring managers.
And what you're gonna see, and I don't know if anybody here's got experience with different size companies, smaller companies, smaller government contractors, it might be one person
Yeah.
doing everything.
Yeah.
Not only all the recruiting, but also handling the rest of the HR stuff. The EO reports that get done every February, and the open season for health insurance and all that other kinds of craziness. And then bigger companies, that when you get to really huge companies, it can be very regimented. Like, no, this is your lane. You just source, stay in your lane. You just recruit, stay in your lane. So every company is going to be a little bit different. Don, you've worked for a few different companies. I mean, you're OBX now, but you've
I've worked for a small company, a family-owned company. I've worked for large L3 Communications. It was growing with acquisition. Every other week we'd get a new company added to the quill. So it's very busy. Interesting. One of your toughest decisions is going to be to determine what kind of company do you want to work for. If you want to work for a large company, you're only going to talk to a recruiter probably for the first 2 or 3 times, and then once you get marshaled down and ratcheted down, then you might get to a hiring manager when they get serious about it. And you may just go into the general pool. I'm not condemning large companies because their needs are so large, they have to operate like that. A smaller company, you're going to get more personalized attention quicker, earlier, like all of us are smaller companies. Our company is about 550 people, and we need to hire 60, 65 people. So you're going to get a lot of attention quicker than with a larger company. So a very small company, one person with 6 hats on, they're going to be very busy. They're going to want to get to a decision like we do as quickly as we can. We get paid to put people in seats. We don't get paid if we don't put people in seats. So we're motivated from our standpoint. If you're a good fit, we're going to move as quickly as we can through the whole process. Fair enough, guys?
Do you have anything you want to add to what we talked about as far as big companies, small companies, things like that? I know you've had some lots of experience in different places as well.
Yeah, so with regards to Adobe, we're structured where you have a front-end sourcer, you have a talent partner, and then we have coordinators that help with all the scheduling. The truth is, with federal, it's me. I do all the front-end, full lifecycle recruiting, everything. So it just varies.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I mean, Adobe is a huge name, a huge company, but when their federal section is not as big as the rest of the stuff. So when we talk about, and this is what we had talked about when I first started, really getting an idea that, what I want everybody to take out of this talk is there is no silver bullet answer. There is no hey, I talked to Joe, he got a job doing this, and if I do that, I'm going to get a job. You could get the different answer from all 4 of these companies or all 20 of these companies today, and it's not that any of those companies is not being honest. I mean, actually being very honest, but they all have different needs and different processes. And so this is where, as a job seeker, the more you can kind of, understand what kind of needs go into it, but also ask the questions. Asking, hey, Mike, what's the best way for me to get in touch with you? And then just whatever Mike says may not apply to Aaron. Hey, Aaron, what's the best way for me to get in touch with you for your positions type thing? Because if you go with the way they want you to go with it, you're more likely to go down the path, you're going down the path of least resistance there. Do you guys work at all? How many of your companies are affected by OFCCP? Office of Federal.
Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's
Yeah, we
to
all
some extent, but how many here, I'm gonna ask this, put it this way, how many here have never heard of OFCCP before? Yeah. What OFCCP is the Office of Federal Contract Compliance, I'm saying it right. Basically, it's the rules that govern how people get hired, how contractors hire people. And the fact that you've never heard of it and it's a huge piece of them is a big thing. So let's start with Mike. Can you just a brief overview of kind of what it is and how it affects the hiring process?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of been following those guidelines ever since. So, as far as breaking it down, it's like, there's certain things on the recruiting side you can and can't ask.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just the way it is, for example, can't ask like marital status, you can't ask certain guidelines, but we've been following those ever since. So yeah, I mean, it's just a sort of quite criteria.
I talk to a lot of government contractors, and they like to, because they have to turn these reports in, they like to collect all of their applications in one spot, which is why you might come to a job fair and talk to Don or Gabi or Aaron or Mike, and they say, hey, love it, you need to go back and apply on our website.
Yeah. A formalized process.
Yeah, and that can be the reason why. So if you walk away thinking, oh man, he's just telling me to go back and apply on the website, that's, what do you think about that as a job seeker when you hear someone say, hey, go ahead and go back and apply on the website? Go ahead. What do they mean?
Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
Well, it's not a brush off, like he says. We are bound to have our trends analysis. If I reject a candidate, I have to have a statement of why I did not accept them for a specific position. And it's usually does not have the right certifications I'm looking for, or not available fast enough, or something, or I can't afford them. Usually, salary's too high. Other than that, we have to have. This OFCCP stuff is driving us to an automated system, which behooves you to go ahead and go through the pain of putting your stuff in there, your resume, and loading it in, and allows us to go back and do our annual reporting, like he says. We all know how all that plays out. And it protects you as well as it protects us. So it's not a brush off.
Yeah, I was also going to say, Bob, an event like today, we have so many open recs and so many different recruiters supporting different service lines, right? So if we say something like that to you at an event like today, it's probably more so to get you in front of the hands of the people that support those recs that we're not supporting directly, right? We can only speak to the ones that we have at our fingertips, and EY is obviously very large, so a little bit different.
And that's a great example when we talked about how they have different recs and different hiring managers. You might be talking to the company needs your talent, but that's not the person they can speak to answering your questions.
Correct. And we're speaking to 100 people today, so we want to get you in the database and get you directed to the right team, just not something we can help you with immediately today.
I mean, Gabi, do you guys have a big ATS system that you funnel everything into?
We do. We have a very large applicant tracking system, but we also use LinkedIn. We create project folders in LinkedIn. We definitely say if you get that, please apply online. To my detriment, I don't do that. I usually say contact me directly. But if you do receive that, not only apply, but use LinkedIn. Reach out to the recruiter on LinkedIn. Reach out to people that you know at the company, or they may know people at the company. Use LinkedIn, use email, use the phone. Reach out. Every avenue.
Yeah, these are, again, you saw a difference in between, the way people do things, which is not good or bad. It's just the way people do things differently. I want to kind of switch into, okay, let's say that you've done a great job. You talk to these people. They said, hey, you definitely want to, we want to talk to you more, and you get set up with an interview. So the recruiter's going to set you with an interview, the hiring manager. Do all of your, when it comes to interviews, are all the interviews at your companies the same in the sense that, are they all panel interviews, are they all single interviews, or do they vary by position and by hiring manager? How does that work with you? Let's start with Gabi and work this way.
Sure. We try to maintain a pretty consistent process. So we have a pretty standardized process that we do follow. For federal, there's a few extra steps that we take, but for the most part, we try to keep it as consistent as possible.
Aaron, what about you guys? Are you standardized, or does it vary by position and by hiring
Yeah,
manager?
pretty standardized.
Yeah.
Individual has to meet with 2 hiring managers at the manager level or senior manager level. So and we can do that in person. One can be conducted over the phone, even Skype interviews, stuff like that.
What about you, Mike?
It's pretty standardized. I mean, what's going to happen is all the resumes are submitted to us. Hiring managers are going to look over and be like, yeah, that looks good, then I'll go set up a pre-screen, pre-interview with them. Everything goes good, then I submit those notes to the hiring manager. They look at everything, looks good. Usually a phone interview will take place after that. There's a little exceptions though, because, you know, being a government contractor as well, you know, we prime a lot of contracts where we directly, you know, with the agency, but we'll sub too. So, you know, like to say Raytheon or Lockheed or something, they're the prime and we sub to them. They might have to go through an extra process, maybe doing an in-person interview with that prime just to make sure, and then that will it. So, but pretty much overall, everything's pretty standardized is how we conduct it.
John, what any data? as far
My
as-
company's about 50-50. Coming in, meeting me today, you're sort of bypassing the recruiting process. So I may get your resume, I may ask you to send your resume to me in soft copy. That's my signal to you that I'm interested in you specifically. I want you to send it back to me. If you take a week to get it back to me, there's a signal from you to me that you're not really interested in us. So be careful if somebody asks you that kind of question. I think that you can be as regimented as possible. Once you get to the actual list, we all have, the hiring managers have a set of canned questions that the recruiters like for us to do for that. We'll have CCP criteria, but it goes freestyle after a point as we go through the interview questions. We're going to ask you, you're going to make a response. We're going to say, well, since you said that, what about this? And sort of, it's going to go freestyle after a while. So it's never totally regimented, although we try to be as consistent as we can.
And one of the things that you'll hear from recruiters and HR professionals is really, I mean, the way it works in most cases, and you guys chime in if I'm wrong on this in your particular case, but the recruiter will bring a slate of candidates to the hiring manager and say, hey, you know, you've got this opening, here's 10 possible resumes. And that hiring manager, who's already busy doing other things, might say, well, I want to interview these 5 out of those 10, for example. And one thing to remember if you get called for an interview is typically at that point, if you get called for an interview, you've really pretty much met the basic qualifications. You know, you've met, the question then becomes, you know, are you going to fit with the company? Maybe they want to explore a little bit of things. You certainly have a chance to differentiate yourself from other people, but they're not going to call you in for an interview if you haven't met the basic qualifications at least. Is that a correct statement?
Absolutely.
That's one of the few things that you can kind of, I tell you, you know, no silver bullet, but that's a pretty true statement across the board. So you come in, let's say you come in, you do an interview, and Kevin does a great interview. You hear people say, you know, you should send a thank you note. Do you guys get those occasionally from candidates?
Not often enough. Email's fine.
I was going to say, what's the best way for you to get a thank you note? Should it be a handwritten card? I mean, they talk about that in transition class, which may take a week to get there.
Yeah, that's fine. Email's fine. It's quicker. It's easier for everybody. I can pull it up, read it when I can get to it, rather than wait to answer the mail later. As long as you respond and say thank you, I really appreciate it. That's all that's necessary.
What about from the recruiter standpoint? Do you guys get thank you notes? Does it help at all?
Not often enough.
Not often enough?
I was gonna say, you know, to Don's point, I think it has much more of an impact on the hiring managers than the recruiters, right? It's very nice as a recruiter to get one, but at the same time, it's always good when a candidate reaches out and says, hey, I interviewed with XX, didn't get their business card. Can you give me their contact so I can send them a message?
Yeah.
That has more
And if
impact.
they ask you, because they've got maybe they don't have the hiring manager's contact information. If they said, hey, Mike, we were talking, you set this interview up, can I get Don's email address, or can you pass on a message? I mean, I'm assuming you guys would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it always helps, especially, I agree with you regarding the hiring manager versus the recruiter. It's always nice to get to, you know, I mean, it shows their appreciation that they're very dedicated and ambitious, so that always helps.
One of the things I would recommend when I teach classes like this is a time to say that you really want the job, if you really want the job.
Yeah.
Because remember, when you interview with these companies, they're interviewing you, but you're interviewing them too. You know, and this is a chance for you to remind them, hey, I was really impressed by this. I was really impressed by the way that you talked about doing this project in the future. You know, of giving them that feedback that you want the job. Because if they interviewed 5 and it comes down to, well, these 2 are pretty close, what do you think? You know, is it Jackson or Kevin? And, you know, Kevin sent an email back that said, I was impressed by your company, specifically this, and this, and I really want the job. I'm more convinced than ever that I want the job, you know.
Can I say something about workflow?
Please do.
For a single position placement, I'm just going to make some guessing, rough numbers. The recruiting team, they're looking at all the websites, they're coming to these events, they're into the office, they're out of the office, they're trying to manage their workflow, they're looking at who's applied online, all those kind of things, trying to juggle all these balls in the air. And they're going to look at 30 to 50 to get me 2 or 3 solid candidates. And then I'm going to look at those 2 or 3, and I may pick one. I may pick all 3 and bring them in and try to assess which one is available. The other thing is, if a company is hiring for 10 software architects or data architects or 10 or something, don't ever feel like you're getting into a pool of people, because you're going to drill down and find out what you really personally going to contribute to that team of 10 people. So don't let say they're hiring for 10, surely I can do it, or I'm just going to be a generic slob going into a hole. That's not going to be the case at all. They're going to give you a personal attention.
All right, so I got one more question for the after. Go ahead, Gabi.
I'd like to add one more thing.
Please.
So, we've all been there where you go through 3 or 4 on-site interviews and all of a sudden you get the thanks but no thanks letter. I can't tell you how many folks we turn around and hire for a different position because we get a nice note or a follow-up that says, thank you, understood, but I'm still very interested in the company, let's talk down the road. And it works. I've had ones where they've gone to the finalist and the second candidate doesn't get the job, emails, and then a week later something opened and we hired them. So always follow up.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes, there's nothing that breaks these folks' heart than somebody who says, thanks for the job offer,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to take it. I'm going to go somewhere else. Then it really, and they're never going to tell you, hey, by the way, you were number 2 because Kevin didn't, they're not going to tell you were number 2 choice. But, that's why they bring a slate, because not everybody who gets an offer, it'd make your jobs a lot easier, wouldn't it? If everybody you made an offer to accepted it,
I think the soft skills we're talking about, the professional courtesy of the thank you, whether or not you get a job is just as important, because like she said, 2 weeks later something pops and says, I remember that Joe or Mary did this, I'm going to go back. They were close last time, we've already been through this cycle, I don't have to go back through that, I just need to get them in front of the hiring manager with a little spark.
And these folks are busy. If they can save weeks of work because they already know somebody,
Yeah.
It's not like they're sitting around doing nothing.
The other thing, there are other soft skills that are just as important. I have a little bit of a quirky customer, so I have to make sure that your operating style can blend with my customer. Mostly it's in the Secretary of the Air Force, it's the senior Air Force levels. If you can't give your 2-minute elevator speech in 2 minutes and not 48 minutes, then I'm going to have problems putting you in front of my customer. So work on how you talk about yourself, get your 2-minute elevator speech down and speak confidently. Then I know I can put you in front of the Secretary of the Air Force or the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and you're gonna represent our contract well.
So I got one more question for the group, and then we'll turn it over to some questions from the audience. So this is just kind of just a general thing, you don't want to go too deep, but you're at a job fair now, so what kind of things are you guys each looking for when you're at a job? I'm going to start with Mike and go that way and come to Don last. So Mike, what are you basically looking for? What are you guys trying to get out of coming to an event like this?
Well, networking especially, it's always nice. I mean, you can see a lot of good resumes on paper, but actually, handing a resume and actually talking to that person, you get a lot more out of it. So maybe there's something that's missing or I don't see on a resume that I would miss if I didn't meet this person. And then maybe after talking, like, hey, not only might be good for this position, but kind of what you want to do, there's other positions that might be available as well. So it kind of opens up the door for more opportunities, I think. But yeah, as far as overall, I'm just looking to find, we got a lot of open recs, so I would like to get as many people that can in front of me and talk out, especially with Danielle, my other recruiters at the table. We're all open right now, so we're trying to get that.
Aaron, what about you guys?
Yeah, I'll echo what Mike said and maybe take it one step further at an event like this. Personality matters, right? We get the chance to put a face with the name, and that'll go a long way down the road, especially once we get you in front of our hiring managers. If we can speak to the time that we met you and spoke with you at the event, and something positive we took away from that, it helps a lot. So.
Gabi, anything?
Yeah, for us, it's branding. Bob, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier in the week. Not many folks know that Adobe does business with this particular community. We've been doing so for 15 years. Tons of hiring, but it just isn't really well known that we actually hire and do work in the space. So the goal is to kind of get out there and get the word out there a little bit more, but also the same as with these folks is to meet people and get in.
Don, what about from OBXTek?
Yeah, this is a general event. You're going to come in, we're going to meet each other for the first time. You may or may not know my company unless you saw it online and did a little advanced research. That will impress me if you've done that. Say, hey, I saw your company. I think I fit this job. That's a great step ahead. That's a giant leap ahead on what most people I usually meet. But this is a generic opportunity. I don't expect you to have tailored your resume to me unless you've already done some homework, and that'll be even more impressive. But when you apply online, you should always tailor your resume to a specific job. Don't send it in and say, I think I fit these 6 jobs. probably not gonna get it. Now, you're making me work more than I want to because I need to keep the speed up. I have to manage the program and do the interviews as well to bring somebody in. So learn those two things. This is generic, follow up with a specific requirement.
Aaron, you have something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what Don said, I think is really important, especially for today. Obviously, all of us have so many open recs that we're working on, right? It's amazing on our end when a candidate comes up and says, hey, I see this rec, I'm a fit for it, here's why, right? If they can really pinpoint, as opposed to, I'd like to come work at your company. It helps us out tremendously if we have an idea as to,
You put them on top of the pile, don't we?
yeah, if you can pinpoint the rec that you're interested in and why you're fit, it goes a long way.
So we got about 15 minutes left before we're gonna let these folks go to get ready. Take some questions from the audience. Any questions for anybody at the panel? You got a question right there?
Hi, I'm Devin Blake, a transitioning military officer. And so my question is, how much emphasis do you put on your LinkedIn profile, resume, personal referrals, and the actual face-to-face at a job fair like this?
Let's take an answer from a recruiter first and get Don's take separately as a hiring manager because it could be a little different. Anybody want to take, go ahead, Gabi.
So I'll give you two answers. It's going to vary depending on what employer you're looking at. Silicon Valley, work social media as much as you can. Yeah, and your network as well, but it will vary. For me, I've been doing this long enough, I really just value, you send me a clean resume, reach out in any way you can, I will then have a conversation with you to sort of balance out all the other pieces. But most employers, they want the whole thing, clean resume, everything spelled correctly, everything, the date's all correct and listed on there. That's probably the foundation, but I'll lean on you guys to see what your experiences have been as well.
Yeah, I think it matters on which situation in the hiring process you're in, right? So from a recruiter standpoint, if you're a passive candidate, your LinkedIn profile is going to be important because that's what I'm looking at when I'm going to try and send you a message or something like that, right? Once I get a hold of your resume and speak with you, that's also very important. But at the end of the day, it's going to be that face-to-face interview with the hiring managers that's really going to put you over the top. So all three are important, but depends on what step you're in there.
Yeah, I would agree. No, definitely resume. It's going to be a big thing. Meeting all the recs. See, the thing with us, we're very particular. I mean, federal side, the government wants a certain amount of requirements, and they need to meet all of those. So that will help me as far as moving forward with that. It's either a yes or no. That's all I can do. But having a good LinkedIn profile, grammar is always a good thing. Of course. We dabble a little bit more too, and we'll go another step. We'll go to Facebook. We'll kind of do all that stuff. That kind of makes a big difference, because everyone's starting to look that way too. So please, if you are applying and have some stuff on Facebook or something you don't want, get rid of it, please.
Anything to add, Don?
Yeah, if you're using social media and you have a picture, for God's sakes, make it a professional picture. I don't need to see you holding your cat or sailing your sailboat, that kind of stuff. Or just make sure it represents you properly. Because I see some that they're so fuzzy, you says, I guess this guy needs a haircut. I mean, what is going on with this going? And so make it a professional look. I don't look at the picture. I don't need to know what you physically look like. I'm more interested in how you handle yourself on the phone and how you handle yourself face to face.
One thing about, you brought up LinkedIn, and this is kind of especially in the cleared spaces, some people, depending on the community you come from, people are more or less likely to be on social media. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, where I come from, we don't get on LinkedIn, Now, a couple things to know about that, and I'll throw in some of my 2 cents here. You can still be on LinkedIn even if you've got a very high level clearance. And if you are working in projects that are full scope poly cleared, you can have a very bare bones LinkedIn profile that doesn't say anything, but you know what? The recruiters who know how to look for you can find you. They know by the fact that you don't say anything and how you describe yourself as just a, cybersecurity 06 in the Maryland area. That right there can be enough for them to try to reach out to you. The other thing about things like LinkedIn is creating a bare bones profile is you as a job seeker can use it to track these folks. So again, a lot of people are just told don't be on social media and stuff like that. You'll hear people say don't put your clearance on there, but remember that people like these folks, passive they're looking for those types of folks. And if you have your resume like on ClearedJobs.Net, only people with clearances are on our site. Only companies who are hiring for people with clearances are on here. We don't have staffing firms on our site. We're the only cleared job board that's like that. There's no staffing firms at all on ClearedJobs.Net. But by having your resume on there, these folks get on there and they search by keywords, they search by things to try to find folks, and it'll tell you when they were last on, they'll reach out. You know, I think everybody up here has already gone through some of the resumes, you know, from people who are going to be here today that registered early enough, because a few weeks ago we sent some resumes and things like that. And a lot of these companies are on our site doing searching for those types of things. So to answer your question, you do want to be on all those things, and just like they were all saying, be professional when you do it. But I would say don't not be on social media completely. Just find the smart way to do it. And anybody here work in cybersecurity? Just out of curiosity. You know what the crazy thing is? Twitter is all about cybersecurity. Cybersecurity people are on Twitter like you would not believe. It's the only industry that's like that. But it blew my mind 5 years ago when I started working with cybersecurity folks.
So no one's mentioned Facebook, huh?
We had a question in the back there again. Was that the second question?
Yeah, two quick questions. How long on average do you spend looking at a resume, assuming you have stacks of resumes to look at? And then what are those red flags that immediately stand out to you that you take the resume and throw it into the better luck next time pile?
That's a great question. And Mike and I were just talking about that before.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I was kind of procrastinated with these resumes they sent me, so I went through 210 of them last night. As far as what I'm gonna.
There's an indicator.
Yeah, exactly. So what I did, so what I'm looking for really, you know, as far as the open positions we have right now, I know the keywords. I already know what kind of those things are. So going through, like, just use an example. Let's say there's a systems engineer or software engineer. You know, I'm looking for a certain type of codes that they have, you know, scripting, that type of experience. And the great thing, a lot of people who submitted, they have those bullet points in the beginning. So right then and there, I'll just know like what their experience is, and I'll probably look at their first chronologically, the recent to probably a second job, and I'll know right then and there, you know, if it's going to be, and that will take me 10, 15 seconds, and that will be, you know, a yes or a no.
We'll do Aaron, Gabi, and come back to Don again. Same way we did last time.
Yep, pretty much same as Mike. Within 30 seconds, looking at a resume, I can tell if the person's going to be a fit or not. So maybe one of the, you know, do nots on a resume is too much detail, too long. If a resume is like 3 pages long, there's 15 bullet points on every job. Like you said, we're looking at a lot of resumes, so not to be rude, but we're not going to read through the 4-page resume.
The phrase I like to use is you want to distill your resume, not dilute it.
Yeah.
Gabi?
That's a really good way to put it too. Yeah, for me, it's, I will look at any resume, any formatting. The thing that tells right away is if there's grammatical errors, if it's hard to read in the very beginning and it doesn't immediately draw name, where they're located, and then immediately the very top says, these are my winning points, right? These are the technologies I know and such. But formatting will sometimes throw me, because if it's just really poorly formatted, then I'll go a different direction.
Yeah, I think simple is better.
Yeah.
Yeah, no novels. Yeah, that's okay.
Hopefully, Don, as a hiring manager, you're getting resumes that are in better shape because you have recruiters who are helping to filter most of those. But
I would hope that's true, but it's not. Our recruiters are pretty busy. What I ask them to do is, if I'm looking at a resume, 30 seconds. If you've got my attention in the first half of the first page, I'm probably going to look at it more detailed. Otherwise, I'll put it in the maybe pile, like somebody said, put it in the other pile. I'll look at it later. It could be over beer at night, at 9 o'clock at night, so it could be that. But for God's sakes, don't use the narrative form to write write a paragraph, because now you're forcing me to go in and pull out the nuts and bolts that I need to assess your resume. Put those nuts and bolts in a bullet form. That's the most effective way to do it. Also encourage you to put your education, your clearance that you have or think you have, and your certifications and years of experience. Put that on the top, because that's usually the first scrub we're going to go through. Does he have a software engineering degree, or is he just good at it? We're going to go look for those kind of things. And first half of the first page, if you got what I'm looking for, then I will read a 6-pager if it's got my attention. If not, 2 pages is going to be boring.
So we're going to kind of have to wrap this up to get these folks out of here, but I just kind of want to kind of put a cap on this resume piece. Number one of the best pieces of advice I tell people is, like he said, those key skills are, you put it up there as, this is what I do, and you bulletize it. And you bulletize the tools that you use, the certification that you have, and that's where when they say you want to focus it towards the job you're applying for, if you know they use this program, this tool, that tool, that's what you want to put up there. And you can change that around if you're going to apply for a different company, because if you've used those things. The clearance level is a big thing right there, because when they say they can look in 6 seconds and no, it's in 6 seconds they can say no. It's not that they're going to say yes in 6 seconds. They didn't hire somebody in 6 seconds, but they can quickly say no. When Mike and I were talking, you say when you're doing your transition class, they'll say, well, if you meet 80% of the requirements, go ahead and apply. Well, in the government space, if part of that 20% you don't have is a top secret clearance, there's no reason to read the rest of it. I mean, that's just, they can't get around that. So that's how they can say no very easily. And plus, they're focused on specific jobs, so it gets easier. Just like you can look at a job description and decide within 6 seconds if you want to apply for it too, can't you? I mean, to be honest, you could look at a job description for a company and be like, hey, I'm not going to work with that company. It took you 6 seconds to figure that out, So we're all like that. Now, while we're here today, a couple things to close down. When they get out of here, I'll hang around for a little bit. I'll be happy to answer some questions, give you my card. If you want an example of a good resume, I can email you one. I've got some example resumes. Next door, we've got Pat Reframe. She's been helping folks with resumes at our job fairs for years and years and years and years. She's super smart. She does a great job. You can go in there and you can talk to her about those types of things, ask those types of questions. When you go to the job fair, there's going to be a thing for, please rate the job fair itself. Part of it is also to rate the recruiters. We're going to ask you things like, best recruiter things. Folks like this who are given their time to show up a little bit early, just remember that. I'm not telling you who to vote for best recruiter or anything like that, but these people came in early and they got teams that are out there setting things up, and so feel free to go up to their booth, and I'm sure, that if you talk about the best way to contact them, they'll let you know whether it's an email or a LinkedIn or whatever, but just, again, there is no silver bullet. Just because Don says one thing and Mike says something different doesn't mean that Don's lying or Mike's lying. It just means that that's how their company works. And if it's a good company, you want to go with that flow.
Can I key on one thing you just made a quick statement on?
You certainly
You don't
can.
have to be 100% qualified to get a job, but you need to be pretty close. 80% was the number you used. That's a good measure. If you see a list, let me know of the 8 of 10 things that you feel you're qualified for, and put a sub-bullet underneath each one of them. Says, I've done 8 years of this and 2 years of that. Take that approach as, I'm close enough, I'm going to take a shot at it. Don't be discouraged if you're not 100%.
All right. Well, got a little buy yourself some free coffee from Starbucks there. Gentlemen and ladies, I appreciate your time. If we could give these guys a 1 round of applause. Let them get out because they've got to get to where they need to be. Well, like I said, I'll hang around if you've got questions. I'll give you my business card. And thank you again, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, Mike, I appreciate it. Thanks, Bob. Aaron, thank you. Thanks very much.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you, John. I'll stop by you.
Okay.
Couple questions.
God, I didn't meet you before we got started.